We're going to take a look at how to graph a rational function. So the first things that you want to do is find the asymptotes of the function, which is where the graph gets kind of messed up and the graph won't be able to cross these lines. So there's a vertical asymptote and a horizontal asymptote. To find the vertical asymptote, you're going to set the denominator equal to 0, and this is going to show you where the domain cannot be. So the domain is everything but where the denominator equals 0. So x plus 3 equals 0. So x equals -3 is our vertical asymptote. Now to find the horizontal asymptote, there's a few tricks to remember. So what we're going to be looking at is the degree of the numerator and the denominator. So if the degree is bigger up top, then there's no horizontal asymptote at all. If the degree is bigger on the bottom, then the x-axis itself is the horizontal asymptote. And then if the degree of the top and the bottom are equal, then the horizontal asymptote is the ratio of those two coefficients. So we have that third case here. We have 3x to the first on top and x to the first on the bottom. So our horizontal asymptote is going to be the ratio of those coefficients. So it's going to be 3/1. So our horizontal asymptote is just y equals 3. Now we're going to go ahead and pick some x points and plug them into our equation and see what our corresponding y points are so we can figure out which quadrant for the quadrants that are created by our asymptotes. We're going to see where our graph is going to lie. So the key to picking points here is that you want to pick x points on either side of your vertical asymptote, but you don't want to pick the actual vertical asymptote point. So we're not going to pick x equals -3 because we don't know how the graph behaves at that point. So I'm going to pick -5, -4, -2, -1, and might as well pick 0 since that's just an easy one. So now we're going to go ahead and plug these into the equation and find out what our y points are. Okay, so we've got our points, so now we're going to go ahead and plot them. So we have -5 and 11/2, which is 5.5. So -5 and 5.5, that's going to be right up here about. And we have -4 and 8, so that's going to be somewhere up here where our equation actually is. But that tells us that we've got a graph that's going to curve along something like this. Not a perfect drawing, but it's close. So then our next point, we have -2, -2. And we have -1 and 1/2. Oops. And we have 0 and 4/3, so that's 1 and 1/3 about. So now we know that this side of the graph curves along this way. And notice that your graphs are going to curve along and they're going to kind of hug those asymptotes, but they're never going to cross them.